40 years ago, one family stopped doing something every gardener is told to do. Their soil never looked the same again. There is a garden in Lancaster County that nobody can quite explain. The soil is the color of dark coffee. It breaks apart between your fingers like bread. No rocks, no crust, no resistance. Press your palm flat against the surface in early morning and it feels warm, almost alive. The weeds are nearly absent, not controlled, not beaten back, just absent. The family that tends it has not run a tiller through that soil in over 40 years. No herbicide, no spray, no purchased intervention of any kind. And every summer the beds produce, abundantly. 300 miles east, in the backyards of suburbs where people care deeply about their gardens, people who read, who research, who buy good tools, the experience is completely different. The spring arrives, so do the weeds. Crabgrass first, then thistle. Then the flat carpet of purslane creeping across the bed edges, all of it returning with the patience of something that has never actually left. Those gardeners spray, they pull, they till, they start again. Season after season, the same calendar, the same ache in the lower back, the same quiet frustration that this is harder than it seems it should be. Most gardeners believe the weeds are the problem. The Amish do not. And the reason they do not becomes obvious once you understand what actually happens when steel touches soil. But that is not where this starts. It starts underground, in a place most gardeners have never been told about. And what is down there changes everything about what you think a garden is. The underground economy. Beneath your garden, right now, beneath whatever you planted last spring, there is something alive. Not the roots, not the earthworms. Something else. Something that has been building quietly in every undisturbed soil on Earth for 400 million years. And here is the first thing that should stop you. That system, the one that has been running since before trees existed, can be completely destroyed in a single morning by a tool sold at every garden center in America. Soil biologist Dr. Elaine Ingham spent years mapping it. She called it the soil food web. The name is clinical. The reality is not. What she found is a civilization. Populations of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and microorganisms so dense and so interconnected that their combined activity rivals anything happening above ground. A single teaspoon of healthy soil contains more living organisms than there are people on Earth. These organisms are not passive. They are building, communicating, trading, supplying plant roots with water and minerals the roots could never reach alone. The most critical members of this civilization are fungi, microscopic threads that attach directly to plant root systems and extend outward through the soil, traveling distances the roots themselves could never cover, reaching moisture and mineral deposits deep below the surface, delivering them back to the plant in exchange for sugars the plant produces through photosynthesis. A second root system, one the plant did not have to grow itself. This is the underground economy, not a metaphor, a functioning exchange network operating beneath every healthy garden bed on Earth. These fungi produce something else as a byproduct, a natural biological adhesive, produced nowhere else on Earth in quite the same way, that binds individual soil particles together into loose, spongy clusters. Those clusters are what make good soil feel the way it does. That crumble, that dark, airy texture, that ability to hold water without drowning roots and drain without turning to dust. The Amish garden, the one with the dark soil that holds warmth in the morning, has had 40 years of uninterrupted fungal growth. 40 years of that adhesive accumulating in layers. The soil is not special. It was given time. Now, here is the part that should make every gardener who has ever owned a tiller sit down for a moment. Every pass of a tiller through soil shreds those fungal networks completely. Not damages them, destroys them. The threads are microscopic. They do not survive a spinning blade. The adhesive compounds stop being produced. The clusters dissolve. The soil compacts. By midsummer, the bed that looked so promising in April has baked into something closer to clay. The underground economy, the civilization that was building the soil the plants depend on, demolished. Every spring, by the tool the gardener bought to prepare the ground. But that is only half of what the tiller does. Research from Michigan State University mapped what they call the seed bank. Every garden soil holds extraordinary numbers of viable weed seeds per square foot, not dozens, not hundreds. In tested plots, the number approaches 15,000 in a single square foot of earth, all dormant, all patient, some deposited by plants that grew and seeded years ago, some carried by wind decades back. Researchers have documented specific weed varieties, velvet leaf, certain amaranths, remaining viable underground for 20 to 30 years without sprouting. What are they waiting for? One thing: light. A single brief exposure to sunlight, sometimes less than a second, is enough to trigger germination in many weed species. They do not need warmth. They do not need a full growing season. One flash of light shifts them from dormant to alive, and every time a tiller passes through soil, every spring, every preparation, every attempt at a clean, fresh start, it reaches into that seed bank and lifts thousands of seeds to the surface. All at once, all into the light. The tiller does not cause the weeds. The seeds were already there. But the tiller hands them exactly what they needed to survive. And it does this while simultaneously destroying the underground network that was the garden's actual immune system. Two mechanisms, one tool, one pass. The weeds arrive because the tiller invited them. The plants struggle because the tiller destroyed the system that was feeding them. And the gardener, standing in a weed-choked bed in July, concludes that the soil is bad, that more intervention is needed. That next spring the tiller should go deeper. This is the cycle. And it has been running in American backyards for 60 years. The Amish broke it by doing the simplest thing imaginable. They stopped. But if the tiller is retired, if the soil is left undisturbed, how does a new bed begin? How do existing weeds get managed? How does the season start without the one tool most gardeners have always reached for? The answer is something most households throw into the recycling bin without a second thought. The forest floor principle. Walk into any forest that has not been touched in a long time and look at the ground. It is never bare. Fallen leaves, decomposing bark, broken twigs, a continuous blanket across the soil. Nothing exposed, nothing open to the sky. There are fungal networks beneath some of these forests older than human civilizations, still intact, still running the same exchange economy that built the soil beneath them. This is not accidental. This is how soil is meant to exist. The covering blocks light from reaching weed seeds. It feeds the organisms living beneath the surface. It holds moisture so the biology below never fully desiccates. Every functional no-till system on Earth, from the Amish garden to the Amazon, replicates this forest floor principle. The Amish version uses plain brown corrugated cardboard. Not plastic, not landscape fabric. Cardboard from grocery deliveries, appliance boxes, moving supplies, broken down flat, laid across the garden bed in overlapping sheets, 4 to 6 inches of overlap where sheets meet. Because weeds, given a single gap of light, a hairline between two pieces, will find it within days. On top of the cardboard, 2 to 4 inches of compost. On top of the compost, a layer of carbon-rich mulch, straw, wood chips, shredded autumn leaves. The specific material matters less than the presence of it. But here is the part about cardboard that researchers find genuinely remarkable. And it is the reason plastic landscape fabric will never replicate what this system does. As cardboard sits against damp soil, it becomes food. Earthworms, largely absent from compacted, chemically treated soil, are drawn to decomposing cellulose the way most organisms are drawn to nutrition. They arrive in numbers. They tunnel through what was compact ground. Each tunnel aerates the soil. Each passage leaves behind castings, some of the most nutrient-dense natural fertilizer known to exist. The cardboard does not just block weeds, it invites the workers. Over 4 to 6 months, it disappears entirely. Biodegraded into the soil exactly when it is no longer needed as a barrier. Plastic landscape fabric stays. It suffocates the biology underneath, tears into strips over years, and eventually has to be pulled out in pieces by hand. Transplants go in the same day. A small cut through the cardboard, a hole in the soil beneath. The plant set in, the cardboard folded back around the stem. The bed is beginning. The underground economy below has been protected. The seed bank above has been blocked from light. The oxygen debt, unlocking what is already there. There is a frustration specific to dedicated gardeners, not beginners, people who have grown food for years. The watering is consistent, the compost is generous, the plants look acceptable, but they never quite take off. The foliage stays pale instead of deep green. The fruit is smaller than it should be. Something is limiting them, and there is nothing obviously wrong to fix. Very often, the problem is not what is absent from the soil. It is what is present but locked. Soil chemistry operates around pH, the measure of acidity or alkalinity. Most vegetables grow best in a narrow band. In that band, nutrients already in the soil become chemically soluble, available to roots. Outside that band, the same nutrients are physically present but inaccessible. The roots pass by them without being able to use them. Call it the oxygen debt. Nutrients the soil already holds, owed to the plant, never delivered. Not because the soil is poor, because the chemistry is misaligned. Many traditional Amish growers correct this with two materials, both free, both byproducts of things already happening in the household: spent coffee grounds from the morning pot and ash from a wood fire. Used alone, each has genuine value. Coffee grounds provide nitrogen, attract earthworms, stimulate microbial activity. Wood ash from clean hardwood, never charcoal briquettes, never treated wood, is concentrated potassium, calcium, and magnesium. Used together carelessly, they destroy each other. When dry ash meets coffee grounds in a planting hole, the alkaline ash triggers a reaction that converts nitrogen into ammonia gas. It escapes before the plant ever reaches it. The pH spike from dry ash can also burn tender young roots on contact. The workaround has been passed down through practice rather than instruction manuals. The ash is never added dry. 2 tablespoons dissolved in a liter of water, left overnight. By morning, the minerals have dispersed, diluted, gentle, still present. A handful of spent coffee grounds goes loosely into the bottom of the planting hole. A 1/4 cup of the milky ash water is poured over it. The chemistry that follows is gradual. The alkaline minerals neutralize the acidity without a spike. The pH settles. The nutrients unlock. The roots enter a balanced pocket where nitrogen is available, calcium is present, and the biology is already active. Gardeners who have used this method describe a difference by the 3rd week. Not dramatic, just a quiet depth of green in the foliage that was not there the season before. The oxygen debt, paid. The winter workforce. The garden spends more months empty than planted. And the seed bank, all 15,000 per square foot, is most dangerous not during the growing season. It is most dangerous in the quiet months. When nobody is watching, when the soil sits exposed, when the weeds are setting the terms for the following spring. There is a grass that grows through freezing temperatures, asks for nothing, requires no watering, no tending, no attention once it is sown. And while it grows, it is quietly manufacturing chemical compounds that suppress weed germination in the surrounding soil. Not sprayed, not applied, produced within the plant itself. Cereal rye. Researchers at Cornell and Penn State documented the compounds responsible. Benzoxazinones. As cereal rye grows through winter into early spring, these compounds accumulate in the plant tissue. When the rye is cut and left to decompose on the soil surface, they release directly into the ground. Suppression rates for notorious garden weeds, pigweed, crabgrass, lamb's quarters, up to 95% for 30 to 60 days following decomposition. 95%. From a plant sown in autumn for a few dollars a pound. Spring management is almost elegantly simple. 3 to 4 weeks before planting, cut the rye at ground level and leave it lying flat. The underground economy below, untouched. The cut rye becomes a thick golden mat that blocks sunlight, reduces moisture evaporation by roughly 1/3, and continues releasing its chemistry as it decomposes. Transplants push through small openings in the mat. A single fall planting replaces months of spring weeding. The stale seedbed in the night shift. That suppression lasts 30 to 60 days. What about the seeds that wake up after it fades? The ones resting in the top half-inch, close enough to the surface that a warm week and a little moisture is all they need? For those, the Amish use a trap, one that requires the gardener to do something that feels deeply wrong. Do nothing, and then wait. The bed is prepared, raked flat, watered deeply, everything ready. And then the gardener walks away. No seeds go in, no planting, just waiting 7 to 10 days while the prepared surface sits exposed and moist and full of light. In that time, the top layer of the seed bank releases its dormant cargo into germination. Thousands of seeds sense the moisture, sense the light, and begin to sprout. Thin threads of green, barely visible, rising with absolute confidence that their moment has arrived. That is when the hoe comes out. Not deep, not to turn the soil. A shallow scrape, the top half-inch, dragged across the entire surface. 5 minutes of work. An entire generation of weed seedlings erased before a single one can grow large enough to set seed of its own. This is called the stale seedbed technique. Called to the surface, and the door locked behind them. The timing is everything. Those seedlings have almost no root system yet,